Hello, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I'm your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I want to thank you all again for tuning into another show. We're going to have another great show this evening. We have Mercy Medical Center's Director of Forensic Nursing, Miss Debra Holbrook, here with us this evening to talk about her work at the Mercy Medical Center. We want to continue our conversation about human trafficking, sex trafficking, and labor trafficking. So we're still continuing with that subject this evening. Last week, Miss Dina Jones from Catherine's Cottage did an awesome job talking about her work in the human trafficking prevention space. So with this show, we're going to speak a little bit more about that with Miss Debra Holbrook. And again, she's the Director of Forensic Nursing, and she will hop on in about 15 minutes so that she could talk to us about her work and about what she does throughout the community. Now, I met Miss Holbrook through the Human Trafficking Awareness Prevention meeting with Councilman Christopher Burnett of the 8th District in the Baltimore City Council, whom I've had on the show before. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about the work that she does in the forensic nursing. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the work that she does in human trafficking, and sex trafficking prevention space. So with that being said, I'm going to read a little bit of her bio to you guys so that you guys can become a little bit more familiar about what she does at the Mercy Medical Center as the Director of Forensic Nursing, and what she does in order to prevent human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and all of these other forms of exploitation with her patients that she serves. So Mrs. Holbrook attended the Union Memorial Hospital School of Nursing in Baltimore, Maryland, and completed both undergraduate and graduate studies through Wilmington University. After working in the field of critical care, Mrs. Holbrook founded a forensic nurse examiner program in Delaware that became a model for the United States and for the U.S. Senate Subcommittee Biden in 2002. In 2002, she testified on Capitol Hill before a Senate Judicial Subcommittee on Crime and Drugs on behalf of the bill that was signed into law in 2005 as the DNA Justice Act. She is the recipient of numerous international awards, including the ANCC Magnet International Nurse of the Year, the Delaware Nurse of the Year, the International Association of Forensic Nurses Pioneer Award, the 2014 Most Influential Marylanders in Healthcare, a Distinguished Fellow, Academy of Forensic Nursing, and the prestigious Fellow, American Academy of Nursing. She serves on the board of the National Strangulation Institute. She has authored grants totaling over $11 million to benefit victims of major and lectures nationally for the Office of Victims of Crime, educating medical professionals across the country. And she has conducted over 200 pediatric and adult sexual assault nurse examiner educational offerings, both nationally and internationally. Mrs. Holbrook has integrated comprehensive forensic practice into the SANE model, and her programs have cared for all patients of interpersonal violence, including domestic, elder, child, institutional, vulnerable populations, gunshots, stabbings, non-accidental poisonings, and burns. She has pioneered the use of the alternate light source in strangulation cases and set precedents in Maryland court systems. She currently is the Director, again, of Forensic Nursing at Mercy Medical Center in Baltimore, which coordinates care to victims of interpersonal violence for all hospitals in Baltimore City. And again, that just gives you guys an overview of the work that she does in the sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking space, prevention space, and that also gives you guys a little snippet of what she does. What she does as the Director of Forensic Nursing at the Mercy Medical Center. And again, we spoke about human trafficking last week. I know it's a very, very touchy subject, but it's a much needed conversation that more people need to have within their community and within the area in which they reside. We talked about the human trafficking space last week with Catherine Cottage's Executive Director, Ms. Dina Jones, but I want to provide a little bit more information about what this looks like because, again, human trafficking, sex trafficking, any form of exploitation can, in the beginning, look very subtle, but people oftentimes don't really think about the number of people who are victims of this. People don't often think about who's affected by this, how many people are affected by this. And so I wanted to provide a little bit more information. In addition to what I provided last week, I wanted to provide more information about, I wanted to provide information about human trafficking in terms of the statistics and the facts that surround this entire world, I guess, or just this whole form, this way of being for a lot of people who are unfortunately subjected to this. It says that sources say that despite increased international attention and resources from states and other non governmental institutions, the number of people falling victim to human trafficking around the world continues to grow. Between 2008 and 2019, the number of human trafficking victims identified worldwide more than quadrupled from around 30,000 to nearly 120,000. With the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of trafficking victims fell as travel restrictions made human trafficking more difficult. However, trafficking in persons, or trafficking people, as I should say, is an illegal practice that is shaded in secrecy, and it is therefore nearly impossible to measure it in its entirety. It goes on to say that there are different forms of trafficking. The two primary forms of exploitation of people are trafficked for are forced labor and sexual exploitation, with regional variances on the proportion of each. And although sexual exploitation remains the primary form, the prevalence of forced labor as the criminal's motivation has grown in the last decade. This, in part, explains the rising share of male victims in human trafficking. The vast majority of male trafficking victims are trafficked for the purpose of forced labor, some 67% in 2018. Trafficking in women, according to this passage, it says that while the majority of men are trafficked for forced labor purposes, women are primarily victims of sexual exploitation, with 77% of victims, female victims, being trafficked for this purpose in 2018. Whilst forced labor and exploitation of other forms certainly are an issue, the disturbing images of women falling victim to the global sex trade remain as omnipresent as ever. Again, this is, again, according to the passage. In the United States, the sheer number of female victims is reflected in the dominant share of women in calls to the National Hotline for Victims of Human Trafficking. Moreover, there are also significant gender differences among the victims of forced labor. While women often are recruited for domestic work as well as illicit purposes, men are overrepresented in the construction area. And in terms of how to fight against human trafficking, this passage provides several solutions to this issue. It says that on the international level, South and Central Asia was the region with the highest number of trafficking victims in 2021. Despite this, the highest number of prosecutions related to human trafficking in 2021 were conducted in Europe. Accordingly, these prosecutions resulted in numerous convictions, with the number of convictions worldwide more than doubling between 2009 and 2019. There are some reasons to believe that improvements are being made in removing the terror of human trafficking and exploitation from many of the world's most vulnerable people. However, as the number of cases fell with the pandemic, so did the number of convictions, and it is assumed that the number of cases continues to be far higher than those reported. So again, this is just talking about what's been reported. This is not covering each and every basis of these kinds of exploitation that people are subjected to on an everyday basis, on a daily basis. So that was one source. And again, I just want you all to just take some time to really think about how human trafficking has really plagued our communities throughout the pandemic. Even though it's been more difficult, it still takes place all the time, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what conditions we're under. Even throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, as you can see, human trafficking continued to take place. Different forms of exploitation through work, through sex, and through any type of forced labor or anything that was used against someone against their will was a form of exploitation, and that did take place throughout this pandemic. But again, I wanted to provide you guys with a little bit of information so that you guys can see what we are talking about and learn about what's taking place, because this is a very important issue that many people don't really discuss as often as they should. And according to another source, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, this data was released from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which released the human trafficking data collection activities for 2021 and 2022. This was in November of last year. It says that a total of 2,198 people were referred to the U.S. attorneys for human trafficking offenses in fiscal year 2020, a 62% increase from the 1,360 people referred in 2011. The number of people prosecuted for human trafficking increased from 729 in 2011 to 1,343 in 2020, an 84% increase. And the number of people convicted of a federal human trafficking offense increased from 2011, 464 people, to 2019, 837 people, before falling in 2020 with 658 people. Of the 1,169 defendants that were charged in the U.S. District Court with human trafficking offenses in the fiscal year 2020, 92% were male, 63% were white, 18% were black, 17% were Hispanic, 95% were U.S. citizens, 66% had no prior convictions. And at the end of the year 2020, there were 47 states that reported this data. And out of all 47 states, of those 47 states, 1,564 people were in custody at a state prison serving a sentence for a human trafficking offense. So again, this provides everybody with figures. This provides everyone with details in terms of how human trafficking has really, in a sense, has gotten worse throughout the years, throughout the past decade. And again, these numbers don't lie. This is from a federal agency, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. These are legit facts. So I wanted to just take a moment to just really think about that, and to really think about the effects of human trafficking, forced labor, sex trafficking, and all these other forms of exploitation that take place throughout our community. This is not just an issue that's local in the city of Baltimore. This is also an issue that is taking place on a global level, on a national level, but it's happening every day, and most people ignore it, not because they don't want to address the issue, but mainly because a lot of people, again, don't really recognize what the signs are when they see a man or a woman or a child being placed into these types of predicaments. A lot of people aren't really certain what to do in these predicaments when they come across a trafficker, or when they come across a victim of trafficking or of exploitation in any of these forms. So these are some of the things I encourage you guys to think about. And again, people don't know the signs. People don't know what to do in order to move forward. Oftentimes, people stay silent out of fear of retaliation and reprisal. People stay quiet because they really don't know how to respond in these type of situations, and how to respond to this when they come across it. I know that it's a really challenging subject to really talk about, but again, I wanted to take some time to really give you guys some facts, and to really give you guys some statistics and reports from 2020, 2021, and last year, so that we can really see how this is taking place during the pandemic. And with that being said, since she's here, I'm going to introduce you all to Miss Debra Holbrook, the director of forensic nursing at the Mercy Medical Center. And again, I want to thank you, Miss Holbrook, for taking some time out to join me this evening to talk about your fantastic work. I read your bio to the audience, and you've done a lot of fantastic work, and you've been recognized for your work throughout the years. You've done tremendous. You've done an enormous amount of work, and you've done a fantastic job at just really taking what you're passionate about and really making a difference. What I've really learned from your bio is that you've really had a chance to really make a difference in so many different capacities, and you've been on other platforms, and you've had a chance to really speak about this work through other outlets and through other media outlets and to other types of audiences. So before we dive into the conversation, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, and what led you to pursuing this career? Because this is very tough work, and this requires a special kind of person. So my question is, what could you tell us about yourself in terms of how you got to where you are today and what made you decide to want to pursue this.
Thank you, Nelson, and thank you for inviting me to your show. Hello to your audience. I'm really honored to have been invited. So I am currently, let's talk about where I came from. First of all, this is led by God. This is not what I planned to be doing with my life. This was totally just following a path that was predestined. I can remember I became an RN in the early '90s, and I can remember sitting in triage one day in Delaware in a hospital there, and a patient came in and said, "I think I was raped," and and I'm not quite sure. I was at a fraternity party and told the story, and a doctor walked by and said, "There's not really anything we can do for you. People are only given date rape drugs in big cities, and we're not equipped or trained to do this." I sat there for a long time, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and she got up and left. And I thought, you know what? What that doctor said was rude and wrong, but the content of it was correct. There was no such thing as forensic nursing. Victims were brought to emergency rooms, and you didn't know what to look for in trafficking or anything else. And so I found a way to get some education on evidence collection, and was able to actually I worked with Joe Biden when he was senator in Delaware, and was able to start forensic nursing in our area where it just didn't exist. And it just opened it up to a field where, patients are victimized by trauma across the lifespan. And now there is a plan, a way to act to take care of them in a trauma informed way, no matter what kind of crime has happened to their bodies. About 17 years ago, I was recruited to come to Baltimore, and to really shake things up here. To really, we're a mobile program. I have 30 some odd nurses that work for me. We travel to all hospitals, prisons, nursing homes, military bases in the state, including the Naval Academy. Wherever there's a victim of crime that it's not appropriate to come to us, we go to that patient, and changes lives in a very different way.
Yes, thank you for providing us with a little bit of that background information that you just shared. I know that again, this takes a special kind of person to do this work, and I understand that you have a lot of roles and responsibilities, and you wear a lot of hats, and you have to really be flexible in these types of predicaments, especially with patients who come through and who experience a lot of trauma and who really don't know what to do. It's great that you have a team of people who work with you in order to make this, happen and in order to really make a difference. So my next question is, again, what are because I learned about you through one of the outreach events that was facilitated by Baltimore City Councilman of the Eighth District, Christopher Burnett, back in January. So I learned about the Mercy Medical Center. I learned about this type of work through that meeting. So my mom and I sat in that meeting, and we were looking at the resource guide, and we were really looking at all of the resources that were provided in the city of Baltimore. And that's why I was just looking through, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about the Mercy Medical Center, because I know that the Mercy Medical Center has been around for years, and I'm not too familiar with what every department does and what everybody's responsible for, because I just know a little bit about the hospitals in the city of Baltimore. But could you tell us a little bit about what your work's like on a local level within the city of Baltimore? Because I've learned about um, the work that you do locally, but again, you've received national attention for the work that you've done. You've received accolades for the work that you've done. So could you tell us a little bit about what that looks like on a local scale in the city of Baltimore? Because this is an issue that is very prevalent within the city of Baltimore. It's prevalent everywhere, but on a local level, a lot of people don't realize that these problems take place right outside our front doors. Oftentimes people go through these victims go through these types of traumatic experiences, and it's very subtle because people don't really know what to look for if they see someone in this predicament. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, are we just talking about human trafficking, or you want me to do an overview of everything that we provide today?
Human trafficking. You can tell us a little bit about that space
Sure.
because again, human trafficking is a global issue. But again, people have a misconception of what human trafficking looks like,
Absolutely.
and who the victims are, and
Absolutely.
where traffickers come from, and a lot of people think that it's only affiliated with people who identify with a certain social group or a certain class, but it's much bigger than that. So
It's much bigger than that.
could
So,
you tell us
first of
a little
all, we are the designated center for forensic nursing in the city. We have all the hospitals and everything that I just told you about earlier. We meet Mercy Medical Center's mission by caring for the most vulnerable, trafficked patients. Trafficking victims in our community are right outside of your door. You don't know what you're seeing because you don't have an eye for what you're seeing. We didn't have an eye for what was coming into the emergency room, right? We didn't have until we began training our medical care providers on what trafficking actually looks like in the clinical setting. We had no idea how to help these patients. So it is happening in your neighborhoods on a local level. It's happening in the city, it's happening in the counties, it's happening in the country, right? It's happening right outside your door. Who are the most often trafficked? You have sex trafficking, you have labor trafficking, there's familial trafficking where people are trafficking their own family members, elder trafficking, we do international trafficking. So let's talk about what some of these look like. Sex trafficking is based on force, fraud, or coercion. Any of those where a person is owned or controlled by force, by fraudulent means to get them to come around and saying, I'm going to work for me or whatever, and then they never can get out of the servitude, or coercion. Children under the age of 17 and under are all, they can't sell themselves for sex. Okay, they can't. They are all considered trafficked. All right, even if it doesn't meet force, fraud, or coercion. And then there's labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is in hotels, it's in migrant working, it's in restaurants, it's in massage parlors. All of these areas are places where we see forced labor, where they have a debt that they can never pay off. Families began trafficking children and family members years ago, but it's never been as prevalent as it's been since COVID. When people were shut down and they were facing hard times financially, they've started putting their children out. Men have started putting their wives out on the streets, their mothers, their family members, their elders in their home. Elder trafficking is not only by familial. Elder trafficking is also experienced if someone's in a nursing home. And now that nursing home can get a higher payer to come in. Maybe this person is on Medicaid and they get somebody who's a self-pay. And they have been known to be putting these people in vans in the middle of the night and taking and dumping them off somewhere. And who's putting them up? Who's taking them in? Traffickers, selling them for sex, because sex has nothing to do with sex. It's all about power and control, because there's nothing sexy about very little children. There's nothing sexy about older people. My youngest patient has been less than a month old. My oldest has been 103. So it's all about who people can have power over. And so then there's also financial abuse, where they take over any monies they may be coming in. And we have international trafficking. There's people who are trafficked here in this country, and their families are being held hostage or they're threatened in their country of origin. So that's what trafficking is. What's trafficking look like? Trafficking is also is usually against our most vulnerable citizens, our young people who have very high ACEs scores. Now, ACEs scores are adverse community or childhood experiences. It's a 10-question test that I encourage all of you and your viewers to take. because it explains a lot about why you are the way you are based on your childhood and the things you've gone through. And it's a direct predictor of poor healthcare outcomes as an adult. The higher your ACEs score, the more poor your healthcare adult outcomes are. But if you get children who have never had a positive male or family figure, they've got no safety net in their lives. They've got nobody who cares about them. They've watched their mom be beaten. They've been homeless on the streets. They've watched weapons be used in their life or in their communities. All of these things causes a very unsettled, traumatic life. And these are children who traffickers can come to and ride by and start showing kindnesses, start showing some kind of affection. And these children are like sponges. This person is caring about me. They're buying me things. They're showing me love that I've never had. And because of that, they're the easiest to be lured into this life. And then anything is better than the home life they're living in. So daddy, the trafficker, preys on that. And then once they're gone and they're with daddy, life is over as they know it. They are now owned. They don't get their own name, their own birth date. They have no choice in their life at all, not when they can eat or sleep or anything in their life. They are literally owned. And for all of those trafficking elements that we described earlier, these individuals very rarely make eye contact because they're beaten for that. These individuals don't make decisions for themselves. When they come into the hospital, most often they are accompanied by somebody who is controlling them. They are GPSed everywhere they go, so they live in fear all moments of their life. They will walk right by a police officer and they're the least likely to say, "Help me," because they blame themselves. They don't know any better because their lives have been so traumatic that this is one more form of trauma that they're living. That's all they've ever known. And so they won't ask for help. They very much self-blame, and that they are so very, very vulnerable that even screening them in a hospital setting isn't effective. It's about listening to them, getting them alone, having some conversations, and offering them a safety net to ways that they can get out of this life. One of the most important things that was told to me by a trafficking victim who I've become my friend is, I asked, what could I say to somebody? What to get them to allow me to help, right? And she said, "Understand this. The best thing that happened to me was being arrested and put into federal prison because I'd never known safety. So if you say you want to offer me help and a safe life, that is like throwing me in a vat of ice water because it's not anything I know. I don't recognize it. I'm scared of that. But getting me away from this trafficker and putting me in prison for a short amount of time, I knew I was safe and I could slowly get myself back." And I thought that was amazing. So just offering people the opportunity to be there, right? I say to my patients, you may have no reason to trust me and you may test me, and that's okay. But know this, I am a practitioner who cares about you. We are a hospital that cares about you. And I watch these people decline my services from time to time. But when they hit rock bottom, they remember the person who cared, the person who asked if they could help them. And that made all the difference.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And thanks again for elaborating on, what human trafficking really looks like and what it really truly is, from a broad standpoint. And I'm glad that you were able to clarify a lot of questions that the listeners had about what this looks like and what who could be identified as a human trafficking victim. Because again, a lot of people don't recognize the signs. A lot of people, it's very subtle. I think that that's why a lot of people don't really say anything or act on that, because a lot of people, again, they don't know the signs, they don't know what to look for, they don't know who's affected by it. So it's great that you were able to kind of elaborate on what that means to be a human trafficking victim, or what the human trafficking, what that world, really looks like. And like you said, um, keeping the door open, for people like yourself, keeping the door open for these victims to come through whenever they're ready, to change their way of life, and whenever they're ready to just have a new start, a fresh start. It's always important to just leave that door open and to be patient about everybody's own process. And like you said, they have no reason to trust you, because they look at you as a stranger who's going to possibly repeat that same kind of pattern that the person who victimized them, whoever the trafficker is going to do. So again, leaving that door open and just being patient about everybody's process, because this is about everybody's journey. This is about, everybody has their own journey, everybody has their own path to take, and some people may walk that path, and some people may recover from everything quickly, and then some people may not. So it's great to stay open to that, and again, keeping your doors open to all of the patients and to people who have been victims of this, especially people who've have been victims of human trafficking for a very long time, and who look at that as a way of life. Because, like you said, you have little children who are victims of human trafficking, and then you have your elders. There are several groups of people that are identified with with this category of people who are victims. I've learned about a lot of this through a lot of the courses that I took at UNBC when I was studying for my sociology degree, and I also have a certificate in the social dimensions of health, in addition to my associate's degree from CCBC, and I learned a lot about what the health outcomes are, especially for people of color, people who live in low income communities, like you mentioned, people who don't really have children who don't really have stability at home, people who are homeless, people who don't really have parents at home, people who don't have some of the basics like food, water, and just the basic necessities of just living every day. These are all a part of our social determinants of health. Again, the health disparities and the health outcomes are often affiliated with many of these victims. And again, everybody and anybody can be a victim of this. We just have to really pay attention to the signs. So, what are some of the signs? I know that you talked about some of the places that traffickers go to prey on victims, but what are some of the signs, I guess, that you could share with the audience about, what to do if you suspect someone may be a victim of human trafficking, but you may not be sure, because again, this is very subtle. Um, Somebody who's a victim of human trafficking, someone who is a trafficker, it's very subtle because they're not like in your face with it. So what does that really look like, to look for the signs, someone who may be a victim or someone who may be trafficking
Okay.
victim? What does that look like?
Well, classic signs are prostitution, right? People who are there are males that you can tell who are watching what they're doing on the streets. They're sitting in cars watching. It's not people who are just self-prostituting themselves. They seem to be afraid. They seem to be down, like, again, not making eye contact with people. You may see this in your areas as general prostitution, or you may see it as kids dressing much older than they are, or having more IDs or more money than they ever should have. Right? There are people who are not addicted to drugs, and all of a sudden you see a rapid decline in behavior, or a rapid decline in what they're being in school, and acting much older than they are known to be. These are just some of the classic signs that we see out there. Young people who are working in restaurants, or working in places where they should not be working, right? We're talking about housekeeping staff that seem oppressed. They seem to be not. I understand that in housekeeping in restaurants, very much they're told to blend in, to bring no attention to themselves. But there's a difference. There's a difference of somebody being quiet and hospitable, and there's some people who look scared to death, right? What can you do? You can't go out and save the world. It is illegal to just automatically call police about a person and turn them in, because it's not mandatory reporting, not for sexual assault and not for trafficking. However, you can call Child Protective. If you see this happening in a certain area, a certain restaurant, and alleys, bars, anywhere, you can certainly call Child Protective and say that you see this going on. There are also tip lines with Baltimore police, so that will get you through to the Human Trafficking Vice Unit that say, hey, we can't tell you about a certain person. We certainly don't want to interface with this person, because you interface with a victim, they're going to get beaten. They're the ones who are going to get beaten, because daddy's going to think that they are telling you something. So the more you think you want to help them, you're not helping them by getting in the middle of that relationship. Does that make sense? So understand things like, it's okay to let police know, I got something I'm seeing here, because there are ways that they can go out undercover and watch a certain area and be protective and find out what's going on and trace it back and get the trafficker. That's how you can protect the child, the elder, the woman, the man, the trans. It doesn't matter. That's how you can protect them best. But if it's a kid you're worrying about, you can always call Child Protective. It's anonymous. You can be anonymous on police tip lines. You can call us. You can call us in the forensic nursing unit, right? You can go to our app, which is Be More Safe. Our app is Be More Safe. It's going to tell you about a lot of the services we provide. It's going to give you tips on, there's a page on human trafficking, things to watch for. There's ways to give us tips that we can give police for you. If you're really uncomfortable telling them yourself what's going on in a certain neighborhood. But, give us some details. We're happy to pass that on for the people in the community. The biggest thing you need to do is not be judgmental. Don't be judging what you think you're seeing on the street, because folks, you don't know until you've walked a day in someone else's shoes and what they've lived in their life. You have no idea what they're living through. And we need to get to a point in society where we stop judging people and start being trauma informed and kind and working a safe way to get them to safety.
Yes, thank you for providing that information to us about what the warning signs are. And it's great that you were able to elaborate a little bit more about, what it looks like when you see a minor, or when you suspect that a minor may be a victim of human trafficking. Because again, and again, a child's brain is not fully developed anyway. So they don't even realize that it's wrong, even though because even though the adult is telling them that it's right, they haven't developed enough to really recognize what they're a victim of and what they're being brainwashed with. So it's really really important for people to understand that, and like you said, not getting in the middle of that and just taking a step back and just letting the law enforcement officers do their job, or letting the nurses like yourself just allowing them to do their job, because sometimes people think that they help by getting in the middle of something, and then it actually makes the situation worse. So it's great that you were able to speak about that a little bit. So my next two questions are, what are some of the most difficult parts about your work that you do, and what do you enjoy most about your work?
And they are tough questions. So, the difficult parts of my work, I have done over 8,000 patients. I stopped counting a long time ago, and not one was a happy case. Every single victim I've taken care of, patient wise, has been traumatized, right? And vicarious trauma is very real to caregivers. Right? You can only hear these horrific stories and care for people who are traumatized over and over in their lives, either because of choices or just bad luck, right? So I would say knowing the most difficult part of my job is being empathetic, not wearing their trauma myself, knowing when I need to talk to somebody to get rid of some of that. You know, my I tell people the avenues for my healing are God and family and prayer and therapy. They're my personal, that's how I handle this traumatic work for 30 years. And being brave enough to say, yeah, this is becoming too much. I need to go talk to somebody professionally. Doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart. What do I love most about this work? I love the way that on the most fundamental core foundation, I can talk to people and I can offer them a way to make their life better, even if they don't know what that's going to look like. I can give them lots of different options. If they don't want it now, it's fine. And I can do it without charging them 1 cent. Free services. I love the way that I can be a nurse in a very different way, save their lives in a non-traditional way. I was a trauma critical care nurse for many, many, many years. And I don't do that kind of life-saving now. But like I said, I make their life worth living. And that's a very different way to save a life. I think that's the most rewarding thing about the work that I do.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, and I definitely understand how you feel about that because this is very tough work, but it's also very rewarding work. So my next question is, I know that you're the director of forensic nursing, and I know that you've been able to make a difference and really accomplish a lot throughout the course of your 30-year career, as you mentioned. But who have been some of your mentors throughout the course of your career, and how have they helped mold you into the person you are today? Because I'm sure that when you started this, you were not the same person as you are today, as a nurse and as just a person outside of nursing. So, how have you seen your growth? Who's mentored you along the way? What does
Well,
that
I've
look like?
been lucky. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I've been very fortunate to stand on the shoulders of giants. Yeah. Nothing I've done has been anything that I ever planned for the course of my work. It's always been put in front of me, right? And it's about choices. You can choose to go down this road or you can run away from it. I guess I've chosen to. Dr. Pat Speck, who is a nurse researcher and has all I ever wanted in life was for some of these people to know my name and to be able to say that they're friends of mine now is the greatest honor. She has taught me so much about caring for people who were victims, especially those of sexual violence. Dr. Jackie Campbell, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, she designed the lethality assessment, safety assessment that shows patients who don't want to report to police if they are high on the lethality score that they're probably going to end up dead, and ways that we can care for them and encourage them to take advantage of a safety net. Dr. Jackie Campbell has made a huge difference in my life. And I talk about Joe Biden, and I don't talk about him politically in any way. This is not political. I'm talking about the man, what he was able to do for me many, many years ago before I testified before the Senate, before a whole lot of this work, was able to introduce me. People in this world who are stakeholders, people in this world who are doing this work without wanting any fame or glory, but just to do the right thing by people, whether they're patients or not, have made the absolute biggest difference in my life. And patients, I've learned everything that I know from the patients who have taught me. They've taught me about being brave. They've taught me about being resilient. They've taught me about the beauty of just crying and sharing and trusting. And I think my patients have influenced my career more than any professionals have. My patients, and I applaud them every day for what they live and what they endure. And still brave enough to tell me the horrific things that have happened to them, and I'm honored. Um, I, I can say honestly that the day that I stop being empathetic and doing patient care and crying with the patient is the day that I should stop doing this work. Yeah, because my patients need to know that I have a heart for them, and that I care about them. So they me the most.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I always like to ask my guests that because in order for us to conquer things, in order for us to follow our dreams and to really make a difference in our communities, we can't do all of this work by ourselves because we all don't have the tools to do everything. We don't know everything. Even though we're placed in a leadership position, we are always going to need accountability, people who are able to provide us with accountability when they see us, falling or kind of steering the wrong way. We all need people who are able to provide us with that accountability when something goes wrong or when we're doing something that's out of the ordinary. And just because we're placed in a leadership position doesn't mean that we know everything, and it doesn't mean that we have all of the answers. And I always like to throw that out there for my guests and for my audience to listen to because regardless of how challenging the work may be, not just this work, but just work in general, you are always in the position where you can always take heed to what other people are saying, especially if it's someone who's been down the same road you've been down, and someone who, in terms of a profession, someone who's worked hard in order to build that type of foundation for their professional career, someone who's able to guide you and really show you the ropes so that you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls, and so that you can avoid a lot of the mistakes, the unnecessary mistakes. I mean, we're all going to have them, but just the unneeded, the unnecessary heartache, and just the trouble that you may find yourself in. So I always like to ask my guests, who's mentored them or who are some of their role models or examples that they follow or that they model their work after. So that's always something that I like to, kind of throw out there. So, how are you and your colleagues working diligently um, throughout the remainder of 2023? Because we pretty much, even though the virus is still here, we pretty much have said goodbye to the pandemic at this point. After 3 years, it's been a lot has transpired throughout the 3 years. I know that the human trafficking victims and the traffickers. I mean, I know that this issue has still been, prevalent even throughout the course of the pandemic. If not, it's exacerbated because of the pandemic. So what does 2023 look like for you guys moving forward? Because for the past couple of years, it's been about the pandemic in terms of how people move and how people do their work. So what does it look like for you guys now?
Well, it doesn't look any different in patient care because we never shut down for 5 minutes during the
Okay.
pandemic in caring for victims. Never once. We still saw people in person. We still cared for them exactly the same way. People were afraid to come to hospitals, so that was a little bit of a challenge. But we have cared for about 400 victims of trafficking in just over 4 years, even through the pandemic. What's changed now is the way we can interface. It's good to get out in the community. It's good to get back in medical schools and nursing schools and being with people, communities, and stakeholders in person, because there's a lot of when we do things like this. I mean, these are beautiful opportunities, and these podcasts and these educations and streamed are wonderful. But there's some things that we just need to be able to do in person. That's what's been one with everything opening back up. Not wearing masks, right? The way that you can take care of a patient when you don't have to wear a mask. It's so impersonal, and they can't read your face. You can't read their face. So that alone has gone to, not having to wear masks unless personally you really want one, or there's a risk. And certainly you would wear a mask if there are risk factors, coughs and other things. But we're able to interface with our patients more personally now, with our advocates, with our nurses, with our medical staff, um, with our counseling team who gets detox for them, all these people, and that's beautiful. So I'm looking forward to that increasing more in 2023. I'm looking forward to doing more engagement. Yeah, going out on things like voice stings with detectives, so that there's a nurse there for people to talk rather than officers who they're often afraid of. I'm looking forward to being able to do more grassroots things where we're actually out doing some preventative work. Our program is primarily reactive, right? We react to crime and we care for victims of trauma as patients. But to be able to go out and do some proactive work in schools and in communities and stopping some of this stuff from happening would be just be a gift. So that's what we're looking at, projects that include that element. We work really closely with Mr. Tom Stack, who is the coordinator of human trafficking with Councilman Chris Burnett, through the office of the mayor's office of neighborhood safety and engagement. And we're doing more and more community activities in churches and other areas that invite us in. If you have a community where you think you've got something going on and you want to know about it, invite us in. We will bring the experts in and all the tools to help you make your neighborhood safer. Okay, so there's things that we're looking forward to in the next few months.
Yes, I appreciate you sharing that. And I always encourage everyone, it's very important to just get involved in all of what the community has to offer. People are doing grassroots work, like you mentioned. People are working behind the scenes because people just assume that because they don't hear about it on television or because they don't see it online when they Google or when they look on their phones. People think that just because they don't see it on TV that it's not taking place, and that's not the truth. So I always encourage everyone to contact their legislators when they have issues, or to contact a lot of the community-based organizations who are doing a lot of great work. Because again, you can get involved in the community in any way that you want. There's always a community out here. There's always an organization out here that's doing work that you're passionate about. It's just your responsibility to look for that. And it's your responsibility. All you have to do is just volunteer. All you have to do is just participate. And you can learn about how you can make a difference, how you can really inspire others, how you can really bring your talents, your gifts, your skills, and your abilities to make the community a better place. So I always encourage people to get involved in the community because a lot of people are doing great work. I've spoken to a lot of people on my show and throughout the community who've done fantastic work in all areas, in all professions. So I always encourage people to contact their legislators, join community groups, join churches, join schools. There's always something to be a part of. So my last two questions before we wrap up the show and I let you go are, what kind of advice would you give to people who may be interested in doing the work that you're doing, and how can people reach out to you if they have any questions or concerns?
Sure. Well, the easiest way to reach out is more safe app here. You can contact me at dholbrook@mdmercy.com with questions to know about yourself, a family member, your community, advice, whatever. I'm happy to catch you. And 30 years of doing this work, I know everybody. My best advice if you do this work as a forensic nurse, you need to be a registered nurse in Maryland for 18 months. Core course. We offer everything that you need to make you a rock solid, amazing Mercy forensic nurse. And we invite anyone who is a registered nurse who is considering this to call. And very little time commitment for an incredibly rewarding experience in your life, in your career. If you're not a registered nurse, there's a lot of ways, as Nelson said, to get in. Contact Tom Stack, and I can give you his contact number if you email me. He helped through many areas of involvement through the mayor's office within our city. We can get you into work with stakeholders that are actually doing really important in the community. and we can hook you up with all those people. There is a place for everybody. Even if you don't want to be out actually working with victims, and I get that because it's very much on the dark side, and you need certain skill sets to be doing that. Community awareness, making a difference. So just getting encouraged to podcast. I'm sure it re-airs. Nelson, am I correct? Where you can watch this later?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it will.
Okay. So encouraging people to this one human trafficking 101, right? Its interest, next steps. Nelson, I'm sure, can guide you. I'm happy to guide you into ways that you can take a deeper dive into be able to make sure there's community awareness, making your neighborhood safer, making your school safer, making your news at 5 safer in our communities, and actually helping people who are victims by letting them know where they go or we go to them, right? That's one of the beautiful things about my program is that it's fully mobile. So if a patient doesn't come to me, that's okay. Because if they go to a community hospital, come in and I can take care of them there in a lot of different settings. So that would be my best advice.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Ms. Holbrook, for sharing that, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to appear on my show. This was a very, very informative discussion. And again, this is my second time speaking about human trafficking. I know that people don't like to discuss this, but it's a much needed conversation that needs to take place more often so that people can be informed and educated about what's happening around them. The only way you don't know is if you don't, just if you don't have the answers, the only thing the best thing to do is to just talk about it, learn about it, and just really speak to experts like yourself who deal with this on a daily basis, because people are often afraid to speak about this kind of subject because of the trauma that many of the victims suffer from, and because of the traumatic experiences that people have. But again, the only way to really figure out how to make a difference is to figure out what figure out and just educate yourself and figure out what it's really like from an expert's point of view, so that you can really understand it, the full scope of everything. So I appreciate you for just providing us with all of the information about human trafficking. And I appreciate all of you and your colleagues for the work that you do locally. And again, you've been recognized on a national level with the work that you've done. The work that you've done has been fantastic. And again, you will be getting a link to the show, so you'll be you're welcome to share it with who you want to share it with, whoever you choose to. And I will be keeping in touch, but I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm really honored to have been here, and this is a great opportunity to share. And I applaud you for being brave enough to bring this subject to the public's attention. Thank you.
You're welcome, and you have a great evening, and I'll keep in
You,
touch.
you as well. Take good care. Bye, everybody.
So that wraps up another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome Guy Radio. I hope you guys had a chance to learn a lot more this go around this week about human trafficking. Again, this is a very, very touchy subject. This is a very sensitive matter, but this is a much needed conversation that more people need to have. People need to get involved in their communities. People need to really, really know what's happening. So I encourage everyone to join a community group to really contact their legislators and see how they can get involved in order to help prevent human trafficking, in order to, again, bring awareness about many of the things that they're passionate about. There's something that we're all called to do. We can all make a difference. We can all volunteer. We can all spend some time doing what we love and doing what we're passionate about. We just have to figure out where the resources are and how to access them. So I encourage everyone to do that. But please meet me next here. Make an appointment to meet me back here next week on April 18th, Tuesday, April 18th, 2023, from 6 to 7 p.m. We will have another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio with another guest. We will be having another guest as a part of our show. Delegate Jocelyn Pina Melnick will be joining us next week to talk about her work in the legislature and her work on the Health and Government Operations Committee. So again, I thank you all. I appreciate you all. I hope you guys are enjoying this warm weather. Spring's off to a fabulous start, and I will definitely be tuning in next week. So I encourage you all to as well. Please share this. Please tell people about this. Please, please, please. Again, if you see something, say something. And again, I just encourage everyone to just keep their families safe. I encourage everyone to just keep their friends safe, their loved ones safe, everybody that they know and that they care about. It's important. So I hope that you guys were able to benefit from this discussion this evening. So I love you all and I appreciate you all, and I will see you next week. Take care.